Now, the government's attempts to get net migration down before next year's general election have seemingly been dealt a significant blow today, with news that the Office for National Statistics is releasing the latest figures showing the number of people settling in the UK is actually going up significantly rather than down. There were 560,000 people who immigrated to the UK. That's in the year ending in March, a rise from the previous year. While only around 316,000 people left the country. Net migration then, 243,000, a rise of 68,000, well short indeed of the government's target of a mere 100,000. Begs the question of whether Britain is full. Douglas Murray is Associate Editor of Spectator, who says yes. Saira Grant, the Legal and Policy Director at the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, disagrees. Warm welcome to both of you. Douglas, if I can begin with you. On these figures, we're an awful long way from the government's target.
Yes, we are. People will remember that this government said, it was a promise really, that they would manage during this Parliament to bring down migration from the hundreds of thousands a year to the tens of thousands. And it's clear that they're absolutely nowhere near that. And this is a serious problem for them. I think not least because it's worth bearing in mind, almost every single poll of public opinion on this matter, the majority of the public want to bring immigration into this country down significantly. So there's a real problem here and a broken promise.
Sorry, Grant, I mean, there's not just the politics of this, but practically speaking, voters, rightly or wrongly, say when you get significant increases in immigration, you get significant pressure points on public services, whether that's schools, hospitals, public transport, which is why the government responded in the way it did. How do you answer that charge of the pressure on public services? I mean, it is there, is it not?
It is there because our public services are not being managed effectively. Population growth has never been a problem if managed. Now, we know from EU migration that EU migrants contribute over £2,000 more than what they take in terms of public services.
These figures are always disputed, aren't they?
Well, this is the UCL study done over a 10-year period that it hasn't been disputed. So the money is there to invest in the infrastructure, should we wish to do it, and of course the other point I would make is housing, which is a big pressure point. We do actually, Shelter tells us, we have 29,000 empty private rented houses in London, 14,000 local authority empty houses. And over England, it's 279,000 empty properties, far more than the net migration figures. So accommodation is there if we manage our resources properly.
Douglas Murray, we ought not to be surprised at this most recent increase. It's a function, it's a symptom of an improving economy. Many of that 243,000 net migration increase hail from Eastern Europe. Many of them are filling gaps in the skilled labour market, for which we ought to rejoice.
Well, if I could just very quickly say, you're right to say these figures are always disputed. The UCL study just cited by my fellow guest actually disputes what my fellow guest just said it found. It also found that I think something like £95 billion was the deficit between what was contributed and what was taken out in terms of public services by migrants over a 10-year period. So there is actually a very serious dispute about whether this is something which is a net gain economically or a net loss economically. But actually, the important thing is about this debate that there are two debates that go on in this. There is the debate about figures, ONS statistics, UCL studies and so on. And then there is public sentiment and public mood and public opinion, which is partly based on that, but not solely based on that. So we have the talk about whether there's a housing crisis and so on. But that may not actually be the primary concern of the British public on this one. A primary concern may well be, I would suggest, is of something quite different, which is the sense that their country is changing faster than they wish it to change, or in a direction they don't want it to go in. And that's a very serious concern. And it's harder to quantify in studies. There is no ONS study of that. But it is worth bearing in mind. Otherwise, there is going to be a very significant divorce, I think, between public opinion and the sort of statistical claims.
Sorry, let's just drill through that a little bit. I mean, it's undeniably true, isn't it, that there are some people in Britain, you could argue many people in Britain, who feel emotionally that there is an increasing disconnection between what they want and what they get. So we have the government failing signally to get anywhere near its stated net migration target. And they feel as a consequence of that, as Douglas Murray says, the character of their country is changing. And that is an emotional argument, isn't it? How do you answer people when they say that to you?
This is a really interesting point, actually. Yes, that is what polls are showing us, some polls. What is interesting is people where migration numbers are high, take London for example, Londoners are proud of the multicultural city that they live in, the thriving, diverse city. The fear stems often from people who live in areas where migration isn't high, and that's a very interesting point, because it shows that fear often stems from knowing the unknown. It's from the unknown. Sorry.
I'm afraid we're all out of time, guys.
Could I very quickly respond to that?
You're going to have to put that thought away, and it sounded like an interesting one, as did yours, Saira.
It's not fear.
We've run out of time, I'm afraid. Thanks both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Stay with Sky News. Coming up.